Hey Chet, how's it going?
Good, good. Was thinking we should while we do blog posts, we do this written blog posts that we could maybe do a video of written blog posts we just did just for people who don't like to read.
We've done blog posts, we've done videos and blog posts. This is the time to do the video for the blog post, where we talk about the director 2.0,
Yes,
our
because
director.
little side note, you know what I found out is so I like to sometimes listen to Audible, so I listen to books.
Oh, is this the
And also
sponsor?
I no, I don't think so. Not yet. But I also listen to a lot of design talks. I watch them on YouTube,
Yeah,
but I got YouTube Premium, and now it'll play when my phone is turned off, so that I can now listen to them as podcasts. So now I can listen to design videos while I'm just walking around cooking or whatever,
you could
and
turn
that has
any
been awesome.
video into a podcast. It turns out,
Yes,
basically,
yeah,
it's
because for the most part, you don't really need to see the visuals. Occasionally, you do, but not that often.
yeah. I mean, no, do people need to be looking at us to get what they need out of this? No, you can just put it on the background
No.
tab and leave it on your
In
speakers.
fact, this is probably a tip. Turn off your video.
Yeah,
Just listen to us.
yeah.
Soothing voices.
We've got really good mics, and the faces.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the director. We posted this a couple weeks ago, and then Thanksgiving and let's say end of development busyness prevented us maybe from doing the video as quickly as we would have liked.
End of development. We're never
I
ending
mean, we never
development.
end development, but like sometimes things happen. There are things
Yes.
that happen at specific times that we're not talking about right now.
Correct.
However, we want to talk about the director. Uh,
Yes.
and we talked about naming a few weeks ago because we were literally in the middle of the process of naming what we now call the director. We went through this whole thing, and the director, if you aren't familiar with Left 4 Dead and stuff like that, is kind of the code that runs in the background behind Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, our game, a bunch of other similar games that spawns enemies, kind of keeps track of how the players are doing, and applies pressure and then lets off pressure, and makes the games feel dynamic and different and fresh every time you play them, right?
Yeah. Well, I would argue that very few games actually have this behind them.
Fair.
That's kind of one of the things that made Left 4 Dead special. Is Michael Booth had kind of come up with this, and it was about pacing. It was about the idea of horror films and how they have those moments where it's not about the action, but about that anticipation of the action. And that's really the impetus for it. And so then it's like, well, how do you know? How do you know what's happening? How do you know what's going on? One of the ways is there. So like just want to say, so in the blog post, we simplify what the director is purposefully, just because the blog post is already like 17,000 words. But so what it's really doing is it's looking at intensity of players to understand kind of what their mental state is. Like if they're overwhelmed, it should slow it down. If they're not, it should go crazy. But underneath that, there's a lot of just randomness to how it's deciding that. Like it's not carrying state of the players across. It doesn't know in the second map how they did on the first map. It just knows their current state, their current health. Like, did things die in front of them? Have they just killed a bunch of things? And then it reacts to that, and it builds those slopes of action and intensity based off of that. And it's a really good start. Really smart. It's a really smart idea.
Well, and given when those games were built, 12, 13 years ago, it was kind of what you could do at the time, because like Left 4 Dead a lot of times was a peer-to-peer game, right, for a lot of players.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the things was, yeah, it just didn't have a lot of the processing behind it to be able to track all of what was going on. And also it was just a big departure from what was there previously, where, as somebody who played the heck out of the Half-Life series when we were working on it, when I was playing episode 2, the combat was going to be the same every single time I played, pretty much. I think the White Thorn battle is a little different, but for the most part, it was like, this person's going to be here, this person's going to be here, 2 to 3 people are going to spawn here. Like, it's very predictable. And it was location based spawning. And so some games still use that. And to their credit, some games use this very effectively, and it's still a good experience of, even though when you walk into this room, there's going to be this, and it becomes a puzzle of solving that, right? And that's a totally good way to do it. But if you wanted to say, hey, let's divorce combat from location and instead make it be able to happen anywhere, then you're gonna have a different experience. So if you think of, like, in Left 4 Dead, the No Mercy rooftop, when you're walking along those edges, you're like, oh man, I hope a tank doesn't come, because this is a really bad spot for a tank. And all of a sudden you have this fear, not just of oh, this is a ledge, but hey, this is what could happen here. and you have an understanding of that space. And so then that opens up to the entire game can have that feeling to it, because you don't ever know what's going to happen when. And that's a really powerful way to do that. But actually, what that does is that pulls a lot of tools from designers that they're used to having. So designers used to having, I'm going to set up this combat arena. They're going to have combat here, and then they'll move on to the next place. And if you look at like Half-Life games, what it is, it's how they do pacing there is it's combat, vista, puzzle, story. Those are the four things that kind of break up a game. So there they would know, hey, we want to have this intense action, but then downtime. So we're going to show you a really cool shot, and you can be like, oh, that's cool. Or you can get some story that happens to you, and that's kind of your break. And that was how they handled pacing, where we're saying this is going to dynamically happen across the board.
So it's interesting you brought up the Left 4 Dead example, because one of the things that happened when I first started here was I said, hey, why don't we, we have sometimes the airlock doors make a lot of noise when they open or close, right? They're a little busted. And I was like, what, this feels like it should be an event every time. And your response was, if it became an event every time, it would just be a tiresome thing, and it wouldn't be, the unpredictability is the feature, not the bug in this case, I think was the idea. And it works really well because it keeps players on their toes, and it means that, like, if stimuli and the reaction are divorced from each other, you kind of are always, it keeps building that tension. You never know what to expect when something happens. So okay, so this is where you started with Left 4 Dead, with Left 4 Dead's director a long time ago. When we started working on the Anacrusis 2 years ago, you started with the director, right? With the idea, you needed a software that spawned enemies on some sort of cadence, and you started with basically the same idea. Here's some random rolls, some stuff that happens, and let's see what happens. And it gave you a way to play test the game, basically.
Yeah, correct. And some of that still exists under the hood of, like, for my audio, I can check to see the intensity level, and that's like kind of a throwback to that. And that was Dr. Kimberly Voll, like the first line of code she wrote was about the AI system and starting to work on that. But then for us, it really quickly became clear that there's a lot of dependencies. And if you wanted to do something new and special, you had to bring those dependencies up along with the AI. The AI itself wasn't enough. So we had started with, we're very, very, very iterative, right? So it's like, let's first stand up a version of the game that is understandable to us, that was successful. Is it the shorthand? If someone called it Left 4 Dead Space, that is a fine way to call it. We are not that anymore, but that was where we started and said, okay, let's bring it up to there, and now we can build on it. What do we need? What prompts do we need players to go for? So, we started actually at that point looking at difficulty, right? Because that's one of the things that the director is really kind of causing, because it can just cause a bunch of difficulty spikes if it's just sending you endless hordes and stuff. And so we really started looking at difficulty and how we think about difficulty, and is this a good team or a bad team? They're going to play the same level of difficulty. How does that go forward, and the problems that creates? And it really was later, and I may be jumping ahead, but we realized difficulty is the wrong way to think about it, and intensity is the right way to think about it. And the intensity should be like, the game should be intense for if you're a good player or a bad player. If you're playing on easy or hard, you should just have that difficulty level rise to you, and the intensity be something that happens for everybody. But there's like a lot that goes into that, right? Because we made the game really difficult while we were experimenting with that. Like one of the things we needed to know, what are the tools the director has to make things difficult? So spawning 2 brutes, really obvious, makes it twice as hard to kill the brutes.
Bunch of in-cap enemies will really mess you up, it turns out. Yeah.
Yes. Hiding those in-cap enemies behind a flasher, which is masking them, really scary. Having things come at you from behind. Having a grabber not go for the lead person, but the trailing person. Like, we did a lot of these kind of things as a way to, like, let's see what makes the game hard, so we understand that. So we could back those off or apply those if needed. And so to all the playtesters who tested during that period, I honestly mean this. Thank you. For those of you who didn't make it through the first map, let alone the first hallway, thank you. That was really valuable data that helped us understand what we had to build. Because for us, our AI director, which is why we eventually came up with the name AI Director 2.0.
It's a big leap.
But it controls everything, and it knows everything. So it controls where all the weapons are spawned, where all the enemies spawn, where all your health spawns, Like it controls all of that information in a way that we didn't have before. And so all of a sudden now we have more control. But at the time, we're making all of this just to make the game harder and harder and harder and harder.
And just like one of the things that I think people maybe don't understand is like it's really easy to make a game that is difficult, right? That like is really insanely difficult and will kill the players immediately. Will, you know, like we can if we put 6 brutes in the map, it'll wipe out pretty much every team, right? Um
Yes.
if but it's hard to make a game that feels difficult while still being fair and not kind of overly intense. And that was the goal. And that was like, in order to figure out how you do that, you had to watch a lot of people do a lot of suffering and just get stomped over and over again. But then, and this happened after I joined in May, at some point this summer we had a period where it was difficult again and was trending toward difficult. We bring external playtesters in, and hardly any of them would be able to finish, you know, the 3rd or 4th level, much less the entire episode. And then one week it kind of clicked, right? Like Amy, I think, tuned the director to the point that like it was giving those ebbs and flows to the action, and the intensity felt really good for them. They weren't a particularly good team, but they finished. And one of the playtesters said something that has become kind of the catchphrase for the game at this point internally, which is,
Yes. Which is we made it. We barely made it, but a lesser team wouldn't have.
yeah, we asked him how hard, if they felt the difficulty was right. And like, that was like, oh, right, this is what we're doing. We're building something that adjusts difficulty dynamically based on the people who are playing and how they're playing, rather than you know, what we think is going to be easy or medium or hard at the time that we ship the game, you know, based on some presets that we set, some things that we
Yes.
establish. The result is that you can play with somebody who's like a world-class shooter player, or you can play with like your 8-year-old kid and have a fun experience for everybody each time. Hopefully, I mean, we're putting the game out. We want people to play it.
Yes.
We want you to tell us how it goes, how it's working.
Yeah. But so Amy Ackerman kind of took over doing the AI director on some points. And this was always in the roadmap for this, but she had gotten over when this started, was looking at the player and actually going, not just what their health is and their status, but actually how good are they into the world? How good are they expressing themselves into the world? So are they doing a lot of headshots? Are they killing a lot of things? Oh, wait, are they taking a lot of damage? How are they taking damage? What does that damage look like? All of these things build it up. But then we also had to take the idea of, is that we learned how to apply difficulty, because we didn't want difficulty to be kind of the traditional ways you do it, which is enemies have more health, you have less health, you do less damage, like all of these kind of things. What's way more interesting is, for every second you're in our game, in a map, the game is harder, because you have more opportunity to have to face things that may stack up and kill you.
Well, and your resources decrease naturally the longer you
Yes.
play, right? Your health, your bullets, whatever.
And so one way to make the game harder is just, let's take things like and hide them off the path. But like when we first did that, we had nothing interesting for you to go for, and you wouldn't go off the path because who cares? But so we created meta compilers. Meta compilers is this whole way we iterated through perks, and starting from very simple idea of like just having extra ammo slots to a whole complex system on its own that deserves its own.
We've talked about it a little bit in some other blog
Yes.
posts, but I think now that we have what is the launch iteration of it, we should do a whole separate post about that probably.
Yes. Yeah, but so that all of a sudden was reason enough that players will go off and explore. So now, if the director decides that the players aren't doing very well and they need some help, you can spawn it right on the main path. But if they're doing really well, it's going to go hide it. And it's going to go put things off the side. Not just that, but other special weapons, other things that you care about. Grenades. We throw a lot of grenades in the world because we want you to use grenades. But so all of a sudden, then our game becomes difficult in a different way, because if you're not doing well, we're not going to spawn things behind you. We're going to actually attack lead characters versus attacking rear characters. Like, there's a whole kind of language we have to express this difficulty into the game that isn't just the simple ways that were done before. And so for us, then it becomes this thing where players don't even notice that the difficulty's changed, but it has. And we notice because we're attuned to it. But most players will just be like, man, that was intense. Like, I had a game the other day that I played with a mixed skill set of coworkers. And we're not talking about this episode yet, so I won't tell you the thing you have to do, but there's a thing you have to do, and you have to work together to do it. And at one point, I'm like, I am just going to go hide in the safe room for a minute, bring them back into the game, and then we're going to go back and complete it because all mayhems come out and they're not able, like, I need just to back away.
Yeah.
And so I was able to help the team there. But like, I play the game every day, and I still had this moment that I never had before that was super intense and crazy and fun, but yet we still pulled it off. And this isn't to say though, so one of the big things about this, when we had talked about doing this previously in other games, was the worrying of rubber banding and kind of marginalizing the experience, where the game's always like, oh my God, we're about to overdo you, we're going to hold back. It doesn't do
Everybody's
that.
health is below 20%. Time to stop spawning enemies.
Yeah. What it does is it sets the table for you. It's still you to execute on or fail. I mean, in that case, I just happen to be a great player and was able to pull it off.
No.
But a lesser player would not have.
Well, but the other thing that this ends up creating is, even when you played Left 4 Dead, there were places that things usually happened, right? Like, it wasn't tied to a specific trigger unless it was like a holdout or something like that. But you knew if you were running through the fair portion of the county fair where all the booths are, you knew that there was going to be a zombie horde somewhere in there, just because eventually the rolls would fail and something would happen. With this, like the other day, the same day that you were playing that game, I was playing a game where the places that are usually loud and busy places were really, really quiet. And the places that are usually quiet were really, really loud. And it ended up being a lovely inversion of the whole thing and felt like a completely different playthrough of the game. So, and that changes again based on the composition of the players, even like how you're playing. We haven't done this yet, but I kind of think on Friday night, one night, we should have some cocktails, load up the game, and see if everybody plays a little differently when they have a little light buzz on, like maybe their poor choices are exacerbated and good decision making falls aside. But anyway,
yes, but it does adapt to you. So if you're just kind of hanging out, you don't just get slaughtered, right? But yes, So because it ends up, when we first had this happening and realizing like, oh, okay, people are getting through, they're having these really intense experiences. It's really hard for an individual to look at that, even us playing it and going, okay, man, that was good, but that's too hard for other people. And it's really hard to get that saying out of your head, because you really look at other people playing and going like, oh my God, they just got through that. How did they were horror, like, oh my God, like, and to be clear, if you're really, really bad, you are gonna pay the price. But it's still, because it's still a challenge, like we still want to have some challenge there, but it does adapt and work in a way that is, I think when you first play it, is not obvious to you. And then after you play it for a while, or if you play it with a different mix of friends, all of a sudden you're realizing like, oh my God, they're not good, but we still had this really intense thing and barely pulled it out. And I had to heal everybody and we saved up, and like my role had to shift and I had to go do these things. It's exciting.
well, I mean, that is the thing. You said it before, but it's worth reiterating. When the game works really well, it feels like those moments when your group's composition exactly matched what the intensity the game was producing. So like you were just barely able to hang on and survive the wave and the specials that came. And maybe a couple people are down, you have to go get them up. You're like, one person realizes that you're 90% of the way to the final airlock, and like the team's not going to make it. So you do the thing you did. You drop everything and you run for the airlock and shut the door, and let it, they'll respawn on the next level. But like the game is much better than any game I've ever played at putting players in those situations. And it does it without rubber banding, without like, oh, well, two people are down, we got to pull off the spawns. No, the spawns are going to keep coming until the spawns were going to stop. And then once they stop, you either survive or you don't. And it's entirely up to you as the player at that point.
And so one of the other interesting things on this though is, so all of this tuning has been done with thousands of play tests, a bunch of outside people brought in, but it's really when we launch that we're going to learn the other tunings to do. But we can actually tune on the server. We can actually say, okay, we're seeing this pattern here. Maybe that is like overreacting. And it isn't like the game's too hard. What it is the director's tool set that it's using for players at this skill level is too much.
Yeah.
Or sometimes like I've had it where like you get 3 goopers.
3 goopers is unjust, Chet.
That is freaking, like, you panic because you're like,
yeah,
I don't care, you got gooed. I'm going to leave you gooed because I got to deal with these. Like, it just radically changes and brightens up how you play. And so that maybe not be the thing we want to give everybody. but it's like, how can we mix this up and how can we have those tools? And it's gonna be a lot of like watching players play, collecting some data on that to see. And then it becomes the question of, what does that do? Is there something historically we can do there? Is there other things we can do? What do weekly challenges look like? Should weekly challenges be something that you should be able to get through, or should they be something that is like, oh my God, this is so hard. There's no way I'm going to get through this. We've got to really bear down together on that. And that's again, like, feel free as a community to give us feedback now on how you think of that. And then we'll see once we release as well to see how people react to that and how they feel about that. Because partially says like, oh man, it's occasionally I just wanted to have those days where like, oh, this is so hard. We're never gonna get over it. And some days I just want to hang out with my friends. And so, what does that look like?
Well, and when you start playing, there's a moment like 15, 20 minutes into the first game, maybe, when the director kind of gets a good sense of what you're capable of and starts probing you, starts sending those first big waves, and you're like, oh, this is not what I was, the game becomes different from that point on, which is
Yes.
that's the moment I love in the external playtest. I can't wait to watch people stream and stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to make sure to hit, we didn't get into this in the blog post, but because this is all happening on the server side, it gives us all sorts of interesting opportunities to do things like having live interactions, or with changing the way the game works on the day-to-day, or maybe even giving players control over the way the spawns, a little bit more about control over how the spawns work in the games, so they can do something a little more custom. I mean, we're not going to do that at launch, but that's definitely, that kind of stuff is definitely on the roadmap for the future.
Well, because it's interesting. So when we do like the weekly challenges now, since the director's controlling everything, we decide where things spawn and we can say, hey, like, there's gonna be no health kits in the world.
Yeah.
You just got to rough it out. Right.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that. Oh, and a couple other side notes to that. So one, this makes it easier for modders then, because they don't need to be placing spawn areas or anything else. The game just works with this, and you actually run a tool we have. It's kind of goes through your map and has some understanding of it and goes.
It figures out where the path is and what's off the path, and where it can, how it gives the director tools to pull players into the edges of the map so they spend more time on the map.
Yes.
And, anyway.
And then the other thing we have with this is, there's still some places where we give back control of the pacing to the player. So occasionally, at Left 4 Dead, they're called crescendo events. Philco is the person who originally came up with the first one of those. Second person to join me on Left 4 Dead, I think about. But and it was like, hey, this is fun killing all these things, but occasionally I want to be able to control the pacing, and I want to be able to say, I'm going to get a little break here now. I'm going to be able to set up, going to be able to play house, putting some things into the world that'll help me defend this area, and I have to defend this area. And so we do mix those up in there still as well. And so those are location based, but we want to have players have that knowing that like, hey, I'm gonna take a quick break. I don't want to, you can also take a quick break by going AFK and the bottle take over. But really you also want to be able to go and say, hey, let's just set up here. Let's plan. Let's be a little bit more deliberate, and we'll go after that. We still have those bases in the game because we want to give that agency to the player.
Well, and it gives us the opportunity to build weapons that are more defensive and less offensive, stuff that works better in like turrets. Turrets are fine in a run and gun situation, but they're awesome in a holdout, right?
Yes.
It's much more fun to watch the turret run all the way out of ammo and then explode and kill a bunch of aliens that are swarming around it. So
okay, so to end this,
yes.
I think we're at the end.
We
decided with Director 2.0 is the name.
Yeah, because we think it's a true iteration on the original Left 4 Dead director.
Favorite name we didn't use. I liked, you know what I liked?
The Instigator.
Yeah,
Dale Earnhardt is what the Instigator is, isn't he? Or is he he was the Instigator? I don't know. I feel, look, the Instigator just seems like somebody who's in just kind of stirring up some business and causing problems for everybody. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes an instigator.
Well, it's like what's the insurance company that has chaos?
Oh, Allstate, the Allstate ads with that guy that just is constantly messing stuff up. I was partial to the composer. But it was a little on the nose for our music themed game so yeah.
The other one that people liked was the conductor, but I kept thinking of it as conductor as choo choo.
Yeah, you wear a funny little hat.
Not the conductor, the musical.
Let me get your tickets, sir.
So yeah, naming's hard. I like the Director 2.0. I feel like it owns it, and it's something that we're comfortable with.
Well, and there's both a significant jump in how the game plays, but also in the technology on the back end. Like a lot of the stuff we are doing, we couldn't have done without dedicated servers. we couldn't, like, we aren't doing it at launch, but one of the things we want to see is if people even want us to track your performance from session to session, right? Like, do you want to start out at the same level you dropped off on Saturday night when you dropped off playing on Tuesday afternoon? We don't know. We're going to probably try it and see how it goes. But there's a lot of opportunity for us to do really cool stuff that is not possible in the old way. It was just a bunch of fancy rolls and nonsense, I guess.
Yes.
But that's it. If you want to know more about this, you can go over on the right side of this page and wishlist the game. We also have a really active Discord at discord.gg/straybombay. And if you aren't on Steam, you can wishlist the game by going to j.mp/theanacrusis, all one word.
Nice. You remember that one.
Yeah.
Really, come to discord.gg/straybombay. Yeah. That is where we have like most of the discussion, posting stuff today. Today we posted a little tease of a user-generated map that we're playing.
Yeah, the first map. The first externally produced map. We also play games with the community on a couple times a week. Games one night and mods another night usually. So yeah, check it out. It's a good place to hang out. It's discord.gg/straybombay, and we will be back soon with another one of these. I hope maybe we should talk about perks next time. I think that would be fun.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot to dig in there.
See y'all next time.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye.